Okay, let's call a meeting to order. And first action would be to all the commissioners are here. The record show. Approval of the agenda. We're gonna add those two.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could request that we add 2 agenda items to the agenda. 6D, I would like it to be the well number 9 VFD replacement. And then 6E will be IT support services provider.
Do we need action to edit? Or do we need action to edit?
No, you could just do one action to approve with additions.
With the addition.
All right, so moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carried. Public comment. I don't see anybody here.
And I have not received that.
Anything? Nothing written?
No.
Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Anybody have any questions on any of the consent agenda items?
I did not.
Nope.
I have nothing, so we need action.
I make motion to approve it.
The motion,
Like,
the second, favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. The reports. We've got the reports. You're happy for you guys, but.
Yep.
It looked good to me.
I didn't have any questions or concerns.
Yeah. Gee, you guys in the spot.
Oh, it's nice to have them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you do a nice job. It's. There aren't questions sometimes. I would never be afraid to ask.
I would not, I appreciate the information. You guys do a good job.
Okay, move on to the regular agenda. And item 6A, simple presentation. Yes, Win?
Yep. Move into the hot seat.
No pressure.
All right, I'm up.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, commissioners, thanks for allowing me to take a little bit of your meeting time today. Keith asked me to come up and give you a little bit of simple background, understand that we have 2 new commissioners and then also for everybody else, just kind of give you a sense of some of the things that we are working on today. So that's kind of what I want to cover here in the next, I don't know, 30 minutes or 20 minutes. I'll try to keep it at a high level and please stop and interrupt if you have any questions. You'd like a little bit more detail on some of the things that I'm going to cover. Hopefully everybody has a paper copy. I'll just flip through versions of this. And you can kind of see as we go through it, there's page numbers in the lower right-hand corner that are in a light gray. They're not real distinctive, but if you kind of look down there, you can see the page numbers. So just flipping to slide 2. Just by way of background, a little bit about who SIMPA is, and maybe I'll introduce myself first. Dave Geschwind again. I'm the Executive Director and CEO for Southern Minnesota Municipal Power Agency, or SIMPA. I've been with SIMPA for, oh gosh, I think I'm going on 27 years, so been around for a while, and 14 years in my current role as the CEO. So we've seen a lot of changes at the agency and resource additions and things over those years, and more coming, lots more coming. So you can see on slide 2, here's a map of the agency's members. We're the wholesale power and energy provider to all of our members, including Princeton. Also provide energy services. One of the things that probably was the foundation for the start of the agency really was back in the 70s when the group of cities that you see listed here on the map were having concerns about where their power supply was going to come from. We were in the energy crisis of the 70s. There was concerns over allocating natural gas for electric utility use. So the utilities came together to figure out, well, what should our power supply look like? Creating economies of scale was important back then, still is important today. One of the first things that that group of cities did was work with Xcel Energy to jointly own Sherburne County Unit 3, we refer to as Sherco 3. That's the big coal-fired generating plant in Becker. We have the agency owns 41% of Unit 3 there. And then a lot has happened with the agency since that first investment in generation. That project went online in 1987. So even though the agency was first created in 1977, the first real significant resource for the agency came online on 10 years later. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we have in the fleet since then and where things are going a little bit. Let's see, flipping the next slide to slide 3, just to give you a sense of kind of the size and scope of what we are at the agency. We got 45 employees, so relatively small number of employees at the agency. Most of our folks are at the agency's office in Rochester, although we do have, you can see here listed on slide 3, we've got 9 people at generating plants that we own and operate in Fairmont and Owatonna. We have 3 energy service representatives near our member communities. Keith is well versed in the energy services representative's role, having been one for the agency in a prior role. Let's see, size of the agency in utilities. One of the ways we measure ourselves is with peak demand. Our all-time peak at the agency was just under 550 megawatts back in 2023. I think last year in the summer of 24, we were 538 megawatts. That kind of is a function of how hot it is on that hot day in summer when everybody has their air conditioners on. Our budgeted annual revenues are 265 million in 2025. It's worth pointing out that we are governed by our members. You know, we are a creation of the cities that came together and set up the agency in the 70s. We have a 7-member board. 3 of the board seats at the agency, and it's interesting the way the founding fathers set up the agency. 3 of the board seats are reserved for the largest 3 members. Those 3 members have automatic board seats. The largest 3 could change over the years, so whoever is in one of those largest 3 slots gets an automatic board seat. The other 4 board seats are elected from the other members through 4-year terms. So we have typically one expiring board seat per year as one of those 4-year terms rolls off.
Where are the 4 largest? Or
3 largest, it's Rochester and Austin and Owatonna are the 3 largest. Next slide, on slide 4. This is just a collection of pictures of some of the generation in the agency's fleet. I was mentioning Sherco 3 that we own with Xcel. That's the picture in the upper left-hand corner. That larger, you kind of see three buildings there on site. Those are the 3 boiler buildings for the 3 units there. The one on the far left, that's the slightly bigger boiler building. That's the Unit 3 building. That's the largest coal-fired generating plant in the state. Again, I mentioned that was went online in 1987. Units 1 and 2 there, they share a common stack, which is why there aren't 3 stacks there at the site. The Unit 3 stack is the one that looks like it's a little further off in the distance, a little further away from the plant than, or at least the boiler buildings, than the common stack for 1 and 2. One of the reasons for that is that there is more emissions control equipment on Unit 3, and it takes more space. So that's why you have to have more space between the boiler building and the stack. Interesting little distinction there. Just kind of going around the graphs, or the pictures rather, clockwise. We've got engine generation there. That's a picture of our plant in Fairmont, the Fairmont Energy Station. Those are natural gas-fired Caterpillar, German-made Caterpillar engines that we have in Fairmont. We have a very similar plant to that in Owatonna. We've got wind turbines there in the upper right. The agency has, we have access to 200 megawatts of wind turbines. In the lower right, we have oil-fired engines. Princeton's very familiar with that sort of generation, here locally. We have a lot of members that have generation like this or even older generation, as you folks do as well. And the agency contracts for the output of those resources and adds that to our overall generation mix that we use to provide for the needs of all of the members. We know that local reliability is important to a lot of our members. I know it is here in Princeton. So I think it's a great program that we have that provides a way for the members to add local generation, those that want local generation, and then the agency is able to purchase the output of those facilities for the overall fleet. Interestingly enough, not all of our members have local generation, and they instead lean on the transmission system for local reliability. It just kind of depends on how the system and what people are used to in their individual communities. We have solar. We have 5 megawatts of solar. We do not have a lot of solar on our system right now. We did a 5 megawatt project outside of Owatonna probably about 7 years ago. I believe that project came online. That was deliberately our first step in that direction. We will have more on the system, I'm sure, in the future as we get closer to 2030 and some of the carbon-free goals that we have all utilities in the state of Minnesota have to comply with. And then finally, in the lower left-hand picture corner, that's a picture of the landfill gas generation unit in Mora. That's on the landfill that's just outside of town. Not a very big unit, 1.6 megawatts, but the generation from that is considered renewable energy because it's using methane that's coming off of the landfill. This is currently what we have on the system, at least in terms of the technologies that we have for generation. Flipping to the next slide, on slide 5, I mentioned we have some carbon-free requirements that start in 2030. We have the utilities, public power utilities like SIMPA and municipal utilities have to be 60% carbon-free in 2030, meaning the energy that comes off the generation that we use to serve the load of your customers and all of our other members, 60% of that has to be carbon-free or from carbon-free sources in 2030. That goes to 90% in 2035 and 100% carbon-free by 2040. So we are on the front end of a transition from kind of the traditional types of generating resources that we're all used to whatever carbon-free generation looks like. And this is what we think it'll look like on our system. The pie chart on the left is our current capacity mix. You can see it's a mix of coal and fuel oil, natural gas, renewables, which is for us, it's wind and solar with a little bit of landfill gas. Demand side management, we have that shown on here. The agency has a very active demand side management program. That's where we work with our members who in turn work with retail customers to help use electricity as efficiently as possible. Think about things like LED light bulbs and other industrial sorts of, or commercial and industrial sorts of technologies that can help the users use electricity as efficiently as possible, variable frequency drives, all sorts of technologies. I think we've got some of them listed. But the big change, obviously, when you look at these two pie charts of where we are today and where we think we're going to be in 2031, it's we don't have any coal on the system anymore. The target retirement date for Sherco 3 is 2030. We've worked with Excel on that. So sometime in 2030, the month to be determined, Unit 3 will be retired. Unit 2 at Sherco was already retired in 2023. That's 100% owned by Xcel Energy. Unit 1 will go away sometime in 2026. So after 2026, it'll just be Unit 3 on that site will be the only operating unit, and then Unit 3 will retire in 2030. So very much a transition in Minnesota as we move away from coal-fired generation and the traditional resource fleet to primarily carbon-free sources with some fossil generation that will be used for reliability. Before I move on to the next chart, that's one of the things that we are working on right now is we are in the process of developing some small natural gas-fired power plants, additional power plants to meet the load growth of our members, as well as to start the process of replacing the capacity that we get out of Sherco 3. Some folks ask, well, why are we adding fossil generation resources like natural gas when we know we have to be 100% carbon free? And the way the Minnesota requirements are crafted, it still allows utilities to use generation like that when necessary for reliability purposes We don't expect that generation to operate very frequently. It's probably like the way the generation here in town operates. It doesn't operate very often, but when it does, it's very needed. And we are looking at adding additional generation that will probably fit into that same category. When you need it to keep the lights on. But it's not the type of generation that we expect to be on all the time that would interfere with our ability to meet our carbon-free requirements. Flipping to slide 6, transmission is a big part of what is on the table for a lot of electric utilities, not just in Minnesota, but really in the Midwest. So this graphic here on slide 6 shows a list of projects on that map. You kind of get yourself oriented with where we are there in the top center in Minnesota. This is a list of projects that's been approved by the big grid operator called MISO, Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. They're headquartered outside of Indianapolis in Indiana, but they operate the grid really in the central third portion of the country, more or less. And you can see the footprint there, the states that are shown in white are part of this MISO footprint. The red lines represent transmission projects that have been approved, a next round of transmission expansion. They're called Tranche 1. I think tranche is the fancy word for group. It's really just a collection of projects that are labeled Tranche 1. These are all new lines that have not been built yet. You can see the ones in Minnesota. And the projects are kind of then subdivided by the numbers shown in those those blue circles. So in southern Minnesota, you have project 4. That's a project the agency will be investing in. We have investment rights in that particular project because it's connecting to a substation that we also have existing rights in. And that's kind of how this whole situation plays out. If you own existing transmission facilities where new lines are connecting, typically you would have the right to invest in those new lines. And it is the sort of thing where you want the right. You want to be able to invest in these lines. The lines that are listed here on this page on slide 6, I mentioned they have been approved by MISO. Well, the significance of that is that the costs of these lines get to be socialized by all of the customers in all of these states. So whether we invest in a particular project or not, we will be paying a pro rata share of all of these lines. And by having an opportunity to invest in the project, we can earn a small return on our investment that will then come back to all of our members to help offset the costs of all of these other lines that are coming our way. So utilities want the ability to invest in these lines for just that reason. You can see just looking in northern Minnesota, there's the projects 2 and 3. The Benton Cassie Crossing line, Cassie's Crossing, I think is near Becker. And then going up to the Iron Range, that's probably the closest project to this area. Those are 345 kV, so 345,000 volt lines. 345 kV is not an uncommon voltage in Minnesota. If you flip the page to slide 7, the next round of projects has already been announced, even though there's really not any construction going on Tranche 1 projects. All the projects on that prior page on Tranche 1, that's about $10 billion of transmission investment. So that's coming. So that's $10 billion of cost that will be shared to all of the basically electricity customers in the footprint. On slide 7 is Tranche 2, now kind of tweaked to Tranche 2.1. This is roughly 22 billion in projects. So between Tranche 1 and Tranche 2, we're looking at 32, probably plus as things get more expensive, billion of transmission investment over roughly the next decade. The interesting thing that's kind of worth pointing out on Tranche 2, if you look particularly in southern Minnesota, you kind of have to work hard to see the state outline here on this graph or this image. But there's some 765 kV lines, so that's 765,000 volt lines. Minnesota doesn't have any 765, and there's not much of that in the upper Midwest in general. So there's a new high voltage backbone that's proposed and approved as a part of this Tranche 2. So at least in southern Minnesota, there's going to be some new types of transmission towers and voltages. And you can see up here in where we are, there, probably the closest new line is some new 345. If you look at on slide 7 here, you know, the light and gray lines are the lines from tranche 1 that we just talked about. Those haven't been built yet. And then you can see where yet more lines through tranche 2 are going to be added on top of that. A big part of this transmission expansion is really trying to reconfigure our transmission system to handle the retirement of a lot of the central station power plants that we've relied on for generations, and then be able to move a lot of the renewable generation, wind power, solar generation out of the areas where those projects are being built into the load centers where the people are. That's why a lot of this transmission expansion is identified the way it is. The agency I mentioned, we have investment rights in tranche 1. We're working on establishing our ability to invest in certain of these projects for tranche 2. For the reasons I mentioned, we want to earn a return to help bring back some of that return on our investment to offset the costs that are coming our way through all of these other projects that are being built. We're going to see more transmission built, I think, in our area in Minnesota than we've seen in a long time. Moving ahead to slide 8, just kind of covered generation and transmission, and I mentioned that's really how the agency got its start. But then over the years, as the members have needed more support in a variety of topics, they've turned to the agency for help with that. We have a very robust set of energy efficiency programs listed here on slide 8. These are some of the technologies that we provide programs for our members to in turn offer to retail customers. The agency funds the rebates that go out to the retail customers. So when somebody gets a rebate for whatever light bulbs they're buying or certain energy efficient appliances, those rebates come from the agency to the members and then from you folks to your customers. Let's see, slide 9. A program that we have, it's not really old. It's a relatively new program. Our economic development incentive program. I know Princeton is a user or participant in that program. We provide some economic incentives to Princeton to in turn provide that to retail customers that are qualifying. Really what we're targeting there would be new loads or expanding customers, or in some very limited circumstances, if you have a customer that can make a valid argument that there's a hardship and but for break in electric rates, they're going to have to close down. There's economic development incentives that are available for those circumstances.
For Tom and Nick, Glen Meadow is
Yep.
the customer that we have that participates in that program. They're in year 2 right now.
They're in year 2 of
When
it.
they relocated into the new business park, we were able to put that together with Civil Assistance.
Okay.
Yep. And that program provides benefits for it. It's a 5-year program that kind of ramps down from a higher savings at the beginning to a lower savings at the end of the program. And then they're on the same, at least from the agency's perspective, the same kind of program that everybody else is.
Kind of analogy to that, I was at a meeting last night, the school district is holding go out for a bond referendum to primarily for high school improvements and addition. So they'll be upgrading lighting, I'm sure, in that project. So is there any opening there for rebates or?
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, I would think so.
And I imagine the whole picture wouldn't be a huge amount of dollars, but it's just something there though.
Yeah, so Nancy Kelly is our CPSR. She comes to town on a regular basis. I know she works very closely with the school district and she'll work with them on getting the people.
I thought I never break off that. Imagine that there. Put my whole foot.
No, yeah, for Nancy will be a little bit on that.
Obviously got a path, yes.
Well, yeah, true. One step at a time, I guess.
But yes, we have a combination through SIMPA. They do all the work on this, but a combination of new construction rebates as well as retrofit rebates.
So I think
They
everyone
handle
will
it.
keep that in mind.
Let's see, slide 10 just kind of going through some of the other programs that are available to all of the members. And really, it just depends on local circumstances, whether or not it makes sense for you folks to participate in some of these programs, but just wanted to make you aware of what's out there. We have a solar choice program that provides a way for members that have retail customers that are interested in rooftop solar, but maybe they don't have a roof that lends itself to rooftop solar, or maybe economically, they don't want to write the big giant check that it would take to put a rooftop solar installation on their particular property. We have a program where they can kind of create sort of the same benefits through participation in the solar choice program. And then we allocate a portion of this 5 megawatt project that I talked about for participants in that. I believe you folks, you have participants in that?
Oh, we do. The utility in the city tried to lead by example, so we're the only ones participating.
Okay. Got it.
We did have some residential customers, but they went into 5-year
Mhm.
route, and so those have now turned
Kind of
off.
come off, yeah.
Yep, and
Okay.
so we only have a couple of 10 years that are still active.
Right, right. Next page on slide 11, Mission Renew, and I know that you folks were instrumental in this program, including the name of the program and the whole setup of it. This is a program that the members can offer to the retail customers that you folks have. If you have retail customers that would like to have more renewable energy credits, in other words, kind of have their electricity be even a higher level of renewable energy than it is today, the agency will sell the RECs, or renewable energy certificates, to participating members to sell to retail customers. And I know Princeton has some customers participating in this program.
Yeah, we've had a lot more interest in that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Another program I don't have a graphic for, we have a scholarship program that's a relatively new program where we are funding modest scholarships in all of our member communities. It would be available to students in your community that are looking to pursue additional education post-high school, and I know you folks are participating in that as well.
Yeah. And Chrissy, if you could talk, because we're partnering with the school district.
We are, yep. So we had set some of the criteria
Mhm.
for the students. And the school is really great. They have a program where they do a lot of the legwork on it. So I've been communicating with the schools, getting them all the information that they need. And then I believe they presented beginning of May.
Okay.
That's when they choose the students. So, but I know one of the things that was important to the commission was also that they could meet who the recipient is
Sure.
of that. So to have them come to a commission, or at least go on a tour of the plant and some of the facilities, just to see what we do. So
I think that's a small ask in exchange for some scholarship. That's a brand new program. And so this spring, I think, is really the first round of scholarships that'll be allocated. So, and we're leaving it up to the members to craft those programs or those scholarship requirements, how they want to.
They had to.
Mhm.
Cause I'm pretty familiar with it through the American Legion
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
and the school district had. They have an awards night, Nick knows more about it than I do, probably. Every year did a lot of, out in the dollars, so we just entered that program more or less.
It's a scholarship.
Our application. So
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's see, why don't we transition to kind of the last topic that I'm going to cover here on.
If I could, before you get into that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would help if you could talk a little bit more about, I mean, you guys do so much for us on the wholesale level. That it's really nice because it frees us up to take care of our customers.
Right.
But the work that you do with the Energy Authority, looking at hedging and insurance, and not to mention the good neighbor rule and all the stuff at the federal level that you guys get involved in. I was just wondering, could you just give them a sense for how complex that stuff really is?
Yeah.
And if it weren't for SIMPA, I don't know how we would do it, to be perfectly blunt about it. It's complicated, very specific stuff that you need the right people in place.
Right, and Keith, you're right. I mean, what we do what we do so that the members don't have to worry about that, and you can focus on the things that we don't do, which is running a distribution system and interfacing with your retail customers. But what Keith's referring to, and I'd mentioned earlier, this MISO that runs the grid in the central part of the United States. They also operate the wholesale energy market, and the current form of the wholesale energy market went into effect in 2005. Prior to that, utilities would typically, you'd run your own generating units to serve your own load, and it was still based on economics. And if you had a little surplus generation that you didn't need for, the next 4 hours or the next day, you might call your neighbor and say, hey, I can sell you some surplus. Do you need any? And here's the price that I'll sell it to you for. After 2005, all of that changed. And we all operate in locational marginal price, or LNP market, where a lot of it's done with computers, but utilities offer their generation into the market. And we also have to project our load requirements with what we think the loads will be. A lot of this is always like today looking for tomorrow, and then tomorrow you're looking to the next day out. And so the grid operator, they're looking at all the resources that are available to meet all the combined loads that everybody says they're going to have on the system. And then they decide which plants they're going to operate. So we're offering in your generating units into that process. We're offering FERCO 3 into that process. We're offering the wind generation into that process. And then they dispatch the resources based on economics. We've seen one of the things that's out there with this market is price volatility that can be dramatically high. That's one of the reasons that we like to have the ability to run generation like here in Princeton and elsewhere across our fleet. And those rare but still occasional moments when electricity gets priced very high and it's cheaper to run diesel generation than it is to buy off of this very high priced market. And these prices change moment by moment. Every 5 seconds, these prices are changing up and down. So we have folks back in our office that are watching this. Keith mentioned the Energy Authority. There's an entity that we contract with that has other utilities that participate with them to manage how we interface with this MISO market. So even more specialized expertise. They're out of Florida, but we're all connected to these folks electronically through computers, and real-time information is flowing back and forth. It's a different way of running the utility system than what we were used to prior to 2005. Keith mentioned hedging. We know that if we're going to have Sherco down for maintenance, that's still a big part of our fleet. So if that's unavailable, then we don't have generation to offer into the market to offset the cost that we're paying to serve the load out of the market. So there's price exposure. So if the market price were to blow out because of, say, crazy cold temps in, like we saw in Texas, Winter Storm Uri, that was over President's Day weekend in February when we all heard about all of the freezing and then unfortunately the deaths in Texas. And that was because of cold weather and natural gas unavailability, which drove market prices crazy high. It's just this, everything is so linked now with fuel availability and price responsiveness on the electric side that sees volatility on the natural gas side, and then we're all subject to it. So having generation available to just keep us out of that market craziness at times is a very big part of what we do for the members, so that you folks are not exposed to very high market prices that can bankrupt companies. There were some small utilities on their natural gas bills. And I know Princeton is not a natural gas utility, but there are municipal utilities that are natural gas utilities that saw 10 years of gas bills in 1 week because of what prices did. And that our goal is to keep our members out of that sort of situation. I could go on and on for hours trying to describe the workings of this, but there's a flavor of one of the things that we do. Yeah. Let's see, if you go to the next page, that's this bar chart. And this is it's really a good problem to have that we've been working with the board and the members to tackle right now. What this is a graph of is our existing debt service. We don't have shareholders. So when we have capital projects that we need to build, whether that's power plants or transmission, we have to turn to the debt markets, borrow money to fund those projects. We're able to issue tax exempt bonds, so we're able to do that very cost effectively. And this is a listing of our current debt service that we have out there. You can see that looking at the legend across the bottom, the dates show when the bonds were issued. So various projects were funded by these different years. The 1994 A bonds, shown in yellow, the first 3 years of it on this graph, those were bonds that were issued in 94 to extend the term of the Sherco debt. When Sherco came online in 1987, Simpa had relatively high rates, and part of that is because, okay, now as a somewhat small utility, we got the newest power plant in the state. And and rates were relatively high. And it's kind of like your home mortgage. The more you can extend the term of your home mortgage, the lower your payments will be. So the folks back in 1994 extended the term of the debt. It was originally 30-year debt. They extended it to 40-year debt on Sherco 3. And that debt will roll off in 2027, which will be 40 years after the project came online. So over the next several years, we're going to see significant amounts of debt roll off of our system as Sherco 3 is finally paid for. And that's what's represented by the yellow lines there, the yellow bars. In 2026, about $20 million of annual debt service drops off. And then the following year, in 2027, we lose that last, it's 38 million. So we have $58 million each year that we're paying on debt service for Sherco 3, and that'll go away when we get to 2027. So when those costs come out of our rate structure, then the question is, what do we do with good news, with those decreased costs? Now, what's not shown on this graph, because this is just our existing debt, what's not shown are the things that will have to be added as we plan to replace Sherco 3 and as we add renewables, which might not be in the form of debt service, it might be in the form of long-term contracts, but as we add renewables to comply with the new Minnesota legislation that we have to have those carbon-free percentages that I mentioned earlier. So if you flip to the next page, slide 13, and I believe this is a graphic that you folks may have already seen. I think Heath sent out a version of this, and this is something that we use with our board and our members. So it's not real fancy looking, but there's a lot of information on here that we talk from. What you're looking at here is a couple of things. The lines, if you ignore the bars for a minute, the lines represent our financial reserves. At least our projections for financial reserves. That's that purple line that bounces around. The black lines that kind of form a bandwidth there that are straighter, but then they kind of reset down in 2031. That's the target bandwidth that we're shooting for, to try to have that purple line be kind of bouncing between the upper bandwidth and the lower bandwidth. Those are the target reserve levels that we have out there. And then if you look at the bars, those represent the projected rate changes as the debt drops off, and then as we have to add costs back into the system to replace Sherco, add renewables when that drops away in 2030. So the bars represent the rate changes on our system that we think are coming to make that purple line kind of do what it's doing there in that graph. So if you think about, okay, practically speaking, if the agency could lower rates pretty substantially here in the next, say, 3 to 4 years, but then we'll have to look at rate increases to kind of get that money back as those replacement resources have to come onto the system. That creates some rate volatility that I think most retail customers are not fans of enduring. And I think Princeton is probably in this category, and I think all of our members are in the category of, okay, how do we smooth out those decreases and those increases? So we spent some time over the last several months talking with the board and the members about ways to smooth out these decreases initially, and then hopefully use those decreases to smooth out some of the increases that would be coming later on. We talked about a Simpa managed, what I'll call a Simpa managed rate smoothing option, or a member managed rate smoothing option. And it's probably not any more complicated than thinking, okay, well, if we kind of bank some of the savings that we're going to see when that $60 million of debt rolls off, and then save that for these increases that are going to be coming somewhat on the heels of those increases as we add these replacement resources, we can smooth out those rates. So do the members want SIMPA to do that at the SIMPA level, or do we want our rates just to do what they need to do to recover our costs, which is typically how we operate our rates anyway, and then let the members manage within their own systems what they want to do with rates. The members can accomplish the same things at the local or member level that we could do at the agency level. And really at the last board meeting that we had last month, that's the direction that the board gave us. There was a consensus around, not all of the members might be in the same spot in terms of agreeing that the agency can kind of bank all of this excess cash above the target reserve levels to use for future rate smoothing. Some of the members might want some immediate rate relief. They might want to deploy those reserves, the reserves build up for capital projects or other uses. So that's where we landed. And just this last slide on 14 kind of highlights that we're going to be working going forward with all the members on making sure that everybody is ready for what we're calling this member managed rate smoothing option. One of the things that's, if we say, okay, we're going to head down that path, one of the options that the agency set up a long time ago, and it was sunset, but we're talking about maybe reopening it, and that's this power bill prepayment program. So depending on the level of the cash buildup that could happen there, it's possible that some members may want to leave their cash at the agency, have the agency invest that, and then work with the member to pull out the funds as necessary to accomplish the rate smoothing that we just talked about. Any returns on any investments that would be held at the agency would be in the name of the member that's participating in this. So that's an option for those members that may want to go down that path, that we're going to look at reinstating and updating the program. Not everybody may want that. Some folks may want to just handle that all locally, and your reserves will be managed here with wherever you have your existing investments for cash reserves that you have today. More to come on that, but that's where things are looking. And I think Keith, you kind of already set the stage a little bit for some of that.
Yeah, we had done a rate study couple, 3 years ago. Because SIMBA has been providing these projections for some time. So we knew all this was coming, and in our rate study, we smoothed it out for our customers by doing incremental increases. So we're looking at a slight increase the next couple of years as we kind of navigate that volatility, so that we're not sending shocks to our customers.
Yeah, if you were even just looking at the wholesale level at our rates, if we were to look at where we are today and where we think costs will be in 2035, recognizing that at this point they're only projections, and boy, everything's changing in terms of cost. If we were to smooth out the increases, we're probably looking at sub 2% annual increases. So increases that we think will be below inflation or at or below inflation. It's just that the way the costs will hit us are not smooth like that because of the big change in debt service followed by some eventual increases. So there you go. There's a variety of topics kind of at a high level. Some of what we're working on. What else can I answer that I haven't already tried to cover?
Okay. You got
Nope, that's a very helpful.
a little bit of an advantage over I've been here a little longer, but going back to the depth chart here. I recall in past discussions, getting that debt paid off is pretty timely with a couple of reasons. Rochester is going to be dropping off in
2030. Yeah, April 1 of 2030, their contract expires. Yeah.
The other Southern Circle plant shutting down in 2030. And our debt, we're out of there anyway.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So
Time it does, I guess, but
the timing's not accidental. It's not accidental on that. Yeah, I mean, if you go back to slide 13, and I didn't cover this just in the interest of time, but happy to respond to the question. You can see that the target reserve bandwidth shifts down in 2031. And the reserves that the agency has to maintain on the system, the financial reserves, they're at least partially a function of the size of the agency and the uncertainty inherent in some of the costs that we have. So as Rochester's contract drops off, then what we think we're going to need to maintain in the way of reserves will go down. So just by way of background, why is the Rochester contract expiring? All of the original contracts when the agency was put together expired in 2030. But in 2009, the agency was looking to have to add more resources to cover the load growth of the members. I mentioned long-term debt and the longer that debt is, the lower the payments are that impact rates. So there was only roughly 20 years left in the contracts of the agency over which to finance new debt for a new power plant that we built in Fairmont. So in order to be able to issue 30-year bonds, which is kind of the standard for that type of resource, we would need to extend the term of the power sales contract beyond 2030. So the agency undertook an effort with all of the members to offer a contract extension. The members said, let's pick 2050. So sitting here today, all of the members, with the exception of Rochester, accepted the contract extension. So all of the members have contract terms that will end in 2050. Rochester has just decided to let the original contract term of 2030 be the end date. And then they will be no longer purchasing from the agency, and they will be covering 100% of their own power supply needs today. And then they're a substantial portion of the agency's resources today. They're just over 40% of the agency. But Sherco 3, the timing of Excel's interest in getting out of Sherco 3, and the unit will be 43 years old in 2030 anyway. So we worked with Excel to line up the planned retirement date for Sherco 3 to match the expiration of the Rochester power sales contract. So Simple will be losing a fair chunk of load, but it'll also coincide with the same timing of the Sherco 3 retirement. So what we've been working on with the members over the last probably 5 years in earnest is, okay, what does the agency look like after Sherco 3 goes away? And with all of the new legislative requirements for renewable and carbon-free generation that we have in Minnesota, it's really a good opportunity to reinvent the system, to transition away from Sherco 3, in our case, into the new resources that utilities in Minnesota are required to have anyway. So we have an opportunity to make sure those resources match the load that we have while we try to comply with these new requirements that are coming our way. So there's a little bit more of the details about kind of what's going on in 2030 and why.
Couple of things I'd like to add to that. If I remember correctly, in 2009, a bunch of the smaller utilities got together and hired a third-party consultant to evaluate the SIMPA extension, and they came away from that saying that it was still a good deal for us. So it was evaluated and determined at that time that the relationship continues to benefit everybody. So that's always reassuring. The second is, and please step in if I say this incorrectly, but with the Sherco stuff coming off and the SIMPA going to have to go out and probably get some more resources, which means basically taking on new debt at some point. SIMPA is not able to just do that on their own. That's a member approved vote, and that's a weighted vote, correct?
Right.
So if SIMPA decides to go out for new bonds, that has to come to the individual commissions for approval, and it's a majority weighted vote as to whether or not the debt can be issued. So the commission does have a say as a vote in how that happens, and I believe that would also have to go in front of the city council too, because it's a debt issuance.
Well, that would be, yeah, whether it's a council thing, that's your internal process, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I just wanted the commission to know that, you know, again, this is part of being a part of a membership agency is we are involved in those discussions, and we do get to have some input into how much debt SIMPA has going on into the future.
Yep. Yeah, debt issuances are kind of a big deal, and the way the agency was created back in the day, the board has to approve the issuance of debt, but then the members. And so I mentioned the 7-member board, but all of the members weigh in then on a debt issuance through this weighted vote. So there's really 2 hurdles that have to be cleared. The board has to approve it and the members have to approve it before the agency issues debt. And Keith does a good job of participating in agency matters. We encourage all of the agency members to attend all of the board meetings, even those that aren't on the board. We bring the board meeting show to town. So every month we have a board meeting and we rotate among all of the members. I think we're going to be here in Princeton in a couple of months. So we encourage everybody to stay involved, even those folks that don't have a seat on the board, because of matters just like what Keith said. When it comes time to vote on something like debt, we want to make sure that everybody kind of understands what are we talking about and they know all the background on it.
The other thing for the commission to at least have in its back pocket so that they know. As Dave pointed out, the Sherco was originally a 30-year bond that got extended to 40 years.
Right.
So we are used to thinking of things in terms of decades. The extension went to 2050, which sounds like a long time, but we're quickly approaching the 20-year mark on that, when that happens. I know Jeremy Sutton has mentioned to me that SIPA at some point is probably going to want to come to the membership about extending even beyond 2050 for financing purposes. So nothing at this time, but I wouldn't be surprised if, at some point you're going to come back and ask for to an extension beyond 2050, just so that we can continue to meet our supply needs in the most cost-effective manner possible. So nothing at this time, but stay tuned.
Right. A lot of the renewable resources that are out there, whether you're doing it under a long-term agreement or if you want to finance that, 25 years seems to be a term that's talked about often. The wind turbine agreements that we have and the solar agreement are 20-year agreements. But in an effort to try to get these projects a little more affordable, some people are looking at 25-year agreements on that. Well, if we sign an agreement today, we could probably handle a 25-year term, but we don't need those resources today. We really need them going online in 2030, sometime in 2030 to line up with the expiration or the retirement, I should say, of Sherco, and then the first step of our carbon-free requirement. So, okay, for resources that we want, in 2030 or 2029, we're probably going to have to start in on those negotiations and that project development. 27, ish or so. Well, if we want to, when we went through the power sales contract extensions that I mentioned in 2009, we gave the members a year to work with their councils and make those decisions internally. So if we wanted to do the same sort of year, sometime in 2026, we're probably kicking off that process to look at power sales contract extensions, which is hard to believe that 2050, is going to be here. But when you start talking about these long-term agreements, and that's the way the industry works, it's not that far away.
I certainly have been here a little longer, but I certainly can't say that since we've been kept, I think, up to speed by everybody, Keith. I mean, we're not in the dark or nothing, not big surprises coming up, or not know if I'm saying it exactly right what I'm trying to say. Very commendable to you guys for keeping the commission on board and up to speed. A thought's going through my head and talking about time machine. I read this morning in the resource. There's a couple of coal plants that are getting extensions. And I didn't write down, but I think they were in Minnesota, but maybe they weren't.
Is this in the MMUA resource?
Yeah.
No, I get it, but I haven't read that.
I didn't, just.
Okay, yeah.
So I was thinking of Sherco. If they got an extension, and this is a hypothetical kind of a crystal ball thing, would it buy us a little time before we had to start looking at other resources for generation?
Well, so,
And we've got our investment paid off.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's a good question. It would be difficult. I wish we had the ability to operate that plant for a decade debt-free. I really do. I mean, and have that 60 million of debt roll off, and then we can live like that, but live with that for a long time. The challenge with Sherco 3, it's a couple of things. There's a federally enforceable air permit retirement date that's related to the air permit that would have to be readdressed. So that's not to say that that couldn't happen, but that would be an effort that would have to be undertaken to see if we could get the air permit renewed after 2030. The issue when you go to look at extending the air permit on a project like that is, are there additional requirements that they would say you have to meet? That, you may or may not be able to justify economically, depending on how many years of life you think you have left in that unit. So that's one big issue that have to be addressed. The other is, it's the Minnesota carbon-free legislation that's out there. If we continue to operate Sherco, we still need to come up with carbon-free energy credits. The process of how that would work is being defined in St. Paul right now. So we'd have to go out and buy credits potentially to cover our load to meet the carbon-free requirements that we have. Not that that couldn't be
Do the
done.
article, go to like detail.
Right.
I know the research, they're pretty, something short,
Yep.
direct article, And, but again, I just happened to read this morning, so it's all kind of played into my head here now.
Well, add on top of, what we just talked about, data centers, and the load from data centers. And you think about, how are we going to power all of this data center load to the extent that it materializes? And then you point to big resources like Sherco that are slated for retirement. And it's sometimes challenging to see how you get to the point where you can serve all that load. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's,
We don't have,
from a reliability perspective, a retirement of a resource like that has to be approved by MISO. So, that's an approval that still has yet to come. We're not close enough to 2030 yet. So that's why I mentioned, it's not a dumb question. People are asking that same one, is that 2030 still realistic?
How many windmills and solar panels and landfills that you gotta have to replace that?
A lot.
You probably get easier to get landfills. That's much garbage.
Yeah, and without getting too far into the weeds of capacity versus energy, a resource like Sherco, if the nameplate of that resource is 1,000 megawatts, and it's a little bit lower than that, but it's close enough, then when you go to operate it, you can get roughly 1,000 megawatts out of it. With wind turbines or solar panels, if the nameplate is 1,000 megawatts of all that you have, on that hot July day, you might get 15% of that or 20% of that. You can't count on getting 100% of your nameplate to the extent that you can get a lot closer to that with traditional resources. So that's one of the reasons that we're looking to add another small power plant. We're looking at adding some small combustion turbines, like think of jet engines that are spinning a generator that are using natural gas, so that if our wind projects are at 15% of their nameplate on that hot summer day, we will have to turn on the gas turbines to keep the lights on and maintain the reliability. So to replace a resource like Sherco without being able to utilize kind of today's technology, and that's a challenge. And very, very difficult. Now, the day may come when battery storage is there. The current state of the art for battery storage is seemingly 4-hour discharge on the batteries. So, 4 hours of discharge isn't going to get you through a night, a sunless night that we know is coming. And if you have, several days of calm, 4-hour batteries won't address that. So the industry is working hard on long duration battery storage, 100-hour. If we get to the point where that's commercially viable and available, that could be a big game changer. But until we get to that point, we still have
property.
What's that?
Where you can put all this stuff takes a lot of property.
Yeah, well, certainly wind resources and solar take a lot of property, right? I think, the rule of thumb for solar panels, at least in my head, it's roughly 7 acres per megawatt of resources, or for solar, excuse me. So that's a lot, a traditional generating resource, even the one here across the street, you get a lot more generation in a very small footprint that you're going to see out of this renewable technology. Yeah, I think people in Minnesota, we're going to be seeing a lot more in the way of solar panels and wind turbines than we're used to as we transition into these carbon-free requirements.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking.
Sorry, go ahead.
What about end of life recycling?
For all of that.
For all that.
Well, the industry's trying to figure that out too. In southern Minnesota, there's a famous example of a bunch of wind turbine blades that had been sitting there kind of abandoned and was creating an eyesore, and there's not a ready-made place for those to go. So I don't have an answer for that either. Yeah.
But else, I quit. And very good having you here. I mean, I appreciate it very much. I can't be appreciative. Sure.
No, happy to share some thoughts with you. Appreciate the time. Hopefully I didn't take more time than you were banking on, but get to the point where you got another round of questions, Keith knows how to get a hold of me and happy to come back. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we can move on to the water rate study.
Yes, Mr. Chair, memo 25-13 in the packet. It's an agreement approval with Northland Securities, to kind of recap where we're at on this project. Yeah, thanks, Dave, appreciate it. The city is moving forward with a long-term financial plan development, with Northland Securities. And as part of that, they were looking at, some of their, sewer, financial needs. And it made sense, I thought, for the utility to kind of just piggyback onto that effort, because a lot of the base data is the same, and allow us to do a water rate study. We haven't done one. Last one I could find was from 2014, and I typically like to do rate studies every 7 to 10 years. I think it's a good number. 5 if you're doing there's a lot of activity going on. And so I worked with Northland Securities to put together a budget. They came back with an agreement and an estimated budget of $5,000. This was included in the budget that was approved by the commission for 2025. It is an agreement, so I wanted to bring it before the commission for approval. And so we're asking for approval for the agreement to move forward with the water rate study.
I guess I don't have any questions, I guess. Go to item.
I would suggest that motion then to approve the water rate agreement with the Northern Securities for a budget of $5,000.
Thank you. Yeah, motion in a second. All in favor, or any more discussion? You're done, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to 6C, service rules.
Yes, Mr. Chair, memo 25-14 in your packet. We've been working through some of our documentation and identified some areas in these service rules that could use some updating to better reflect current operations and streamline our process a little bit more. In the memo, it identifies some of the more significant changes that we're recommending. And like I said, there were just also some grammatical and wording choices that we did update. So I have a copy of the new service rules in the packet. Staff's recommending approval for the revised service rules.
Quite a bit here to absorb, but it's thing together very well. I did catch a date discrepancy. We talked about this.
Oh, yes, I did make that correction. In terms of the hours.
Operational.
Correct.
The only other thing I had was, I think it's a good way to do what you're doing, but you're gonna drop the door hanger policy and rely on what email.
Correct. What we are suggesting is to eliminate the physical door hangers. We will still do the notification process, We are getting more and more emails and a lot of our customers are communicating more digitally now than they did when that process was set up. So, but it would eliminate the physical door hangers and needing staff to go out to each individual site a couple of days prior to disconnection. And the other reason we can do it too is because we are now fully converted to an AMI system, so we can do usage checks here in the office without having to do a site visit.
I guess the concern would be, and it would be any, no matter how we do it, I guess. Somebody's gonna say, well, I didn't, was notified, or I didn't know, or.
So we've already,
You gotta hear that, that's right.
so if the commission approves this, we have already lined up to have the last door hangers of the season have a notification on there that this is the final door hanger that we're gonna post. We have also gone through and identified the subset of customers who have had door hangers in the last couple of years. We will send them a direct mail piece as well, notifying them of the change. So we're gonna do everything we can over the next few months to make sure that we inform those folks most likely to be impacted by this decision.
Yes, I guess there's probably no way to do it, to make sure that we know, so we have our back, cover our back, that we know they did get it, but just ignored it.
Well, that's why,
Maybe I'm overthinking this.
well, actually, that's why I think going to email is a better option. With door hangers, I mean, do you get it on the right door? Some people come in the back and might never see it. They can blow, yeah, they can blow away. But with an email, if the email bounces, we'll know right away.
So how many customers are we talking that this affects?
We typically, I guess what do you do for?
I can jump in. On a monthly basis, we typically do between 30 and 60 door hangers.
It's a little time.
It is, but then they also have gotten a bill, a reminder, a disconnection letter, and then a bill and a reminder. So they've gotten all of those communications prior to a door hanger actually going out. And that's a month and almost 60 days by the time they're
It's
disconnected.
probably the same customers over.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm suggesting that we're not doing everything in
Yeah.
our power to notify the customer. I'm not saying that, I'm looking for it. And again, maybe I'm overthinking it, but somebody turn back and sue us saying we didn't notify you, we weren't notified or whatever.
So every disconnection day, we have people who say, I didn't get notified. And so we ask them, did you get your bill? Well, yes. Okay, that's one notification. Did you get a reminder? Well, yes, but nobody came and told me. So we do hear nobody knocked on my door and told me I was getting disconnected. Yet they've gotten bills, reminders, disconnection, all of these other items as well.
They hide in the bathroom, but we know to hang on it.
Sometimes.
The key is that we're following any statutory requirements regarding notification of.
The only, the only statutory requirement is a 30-day written notice if it's by mail, which we do.
Yeah.
But we also said, as Chris mentioned, we also send you reminders. And we want to start utilizing email more and more. We will always do the 30-day letter.
And that's,
That is part of our statute.
that 30-day requirement now is part of the problem with the door hangers too. Cause it used to be 20 days.
Yeah, so we get some overlap between our billing years.
So our new letters for April go out before we do the March door hangers. To say, we usually hang them a week before, days before, say if, disconnection is this day. Well, the letters for April have already gone out because they changed the legislation to a 30 days, so the letters, and so they get the letter and they think, oh, it's April. And then we show up 6 days later, hang a door hanger, they just think it's identical to the letter. And then 2 days, 3 days later, we're there to shut them off, and so there's.
It eliminates that confusion.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I mean, you probably just kind of answered my, as long as we're following statutory requirement, I think that's all we have to do.
If we're following, I don't think there's a ton of liability.
Right. And that, I guess that answered my thoughts on this.
I'm glad you're on.
Well,
It's our.
it's better to overthink it than underthink it. Okay, we need action on that, I guess.
Yes, sir.
I move to approve 2514.
A motion,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and then that motion carried. Okay, we'll do 6D, well 9.
Yeah, actually, Scott, do you want to just kind of explain this, or do you want me to take?
Yeah, sure, I can. Well nine, the BFD controller for the well pump itself. We had an issue with it, had some techs out, looked at it, tried some repairs. Determined that it being a main control board that is obsolete and unavailable for repairs, so we have to do a complete unit replacement on that with a BFD unit that runs that motor. We got a few quotes on there. The one we were looking at here with the total control, which is our current SCADA provider. There are guys in the middle of the night when stuff's not working, and I can lean back to do all the controls and the SCADA system, which is all the tower levels, what the plant's doing. It's a central monitoring system for all the, essentially the whole water system is all tied to that whole thing, and they integrate that well controls and how all that stuff is all tied together. So they'll integrate that back in there, the new one. The other quote is an outside one, so we would still need to bring total in to integrate that back into, so it talks to everything else, so. For the recommendation or the approval for the total control ABB unit to get that well back up and going.
What's the lifespan of this?
The ones that are in there are original, so they're almost 20 years. So it's been good luck. We keep up on maintenance. They said has been a big thing. They're a 10 to 20 year. There's filters and heaters and stuff on them enclosures that we do maintenance on there, and that's I think helps to extend the life on that for staying up on the maintenance on side of it, but. So keep the peace out.
I'm sure the total controls can be a lot easier in time. It's gonna be a lot less time for you to utilize that.
Yes, and he said, he could service the other ones. Or, he couldn't use the other ones, but he said he didn't personally have the knowledge on that unit. This is their unit that they are familiar with to provide the technical support when things ain't working.
But to justify the additional $10,000 or so is easily paid for by not having to pay total for the integration and your less time for your staff.
Correct.
Yeah.
Too dramatic or having that figure, well, mine will be in service for quite some time. That's why people have no more.
Well, yeah, yes, that's going to be an ongoing question, but part of the reason we want to get this VFD replaced now, I mean, just it is the proper way to do it, but we want to be able to start running it at partial power. So, VFD allows you to run the motor not at 100%, but at 50%. That way we can start blending wells 8 and 9 together a lot better and do some more monitoring and testing of what's coming into the system.
So this is the one down by Crystal.
Yes, there's two separate wells down there. 8 and 9 are identical, they're twins, so they're put in there at the same time, so hopefully 8 makes it for a long time yet, but seeing one's failed, we've kind of seen stuff chase each other around a little bit too, so so hopefully that one keeps going, but this is kind of like
Kind of normal.
I know it's kind of we have a feeling there's quite a bit of stuff in the plants that are getting to that point. They're not bad, where we haven't put scheduled budget stuff for them to do. Kind of more this point of when they do fail, we're kind of in a deal where we need to replace them and get them back going. So
That makes sense to me, I guess.
I'd like to make a motion then to approve the recommendation to utilize total controls quote to take care of the problem memorandum 2515.
Okay, we have a motion. Second. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, that motion carried. 6E, IT support.
Yes, Mr. Chair, 2516 memorandum, it's a proposal to switch our IT support services to Metro Sales. I've included their proposal. The reason we're bringing this before you is, as our IT support needs to continue to evolve and we're upgrading and changing some of what our internal capabilities and needs are. It's I think prudent to work with Metro Sales on it. We have been struggling with our current provider to address some known technical issues, and we've had some concerns with not receiving adequate input or in a timely manner. And we're continuing to spend more and more internal time trying to manage that contract. In addition, under that contract, which is, we provide the equipment and they manage it. They are at a point where they're asking us to do a lot of equipment replacements, which would have a significant budget impact. Under the Metro Sales contract, they are a fully managed equipment services contract. So they provide the equipment because they want to know that the equipment that they're managing, they can take care of. They want to keep it up to their specs. So this would be a perfect time to switch to a more managed services IT contractor. We've been very pleased with the conversations that we've had with Metro Sales. The our provider does require a 60-day notification to cancel the contract. So we'd like to get moving on that right away so we can get Metro Sales in here. Probably effective June 1st is what we would be thinking into a contract. But we are struggling at the moment to provide the level of service that we need to keep staff keep staff going. And I think as I mentioned to all the commissioners, being a utility and being government does make us susceptible or put the target on our back when it comes to bad actors out there. So it's really important that we keep our IT systems current and keep our cybersecurity strong. I think Metro City would do that.
Did I miss it? Was there any costs? I'm not, was there cost differences? The different cost different? Nothing to do with it.
Yes, but it's hard to do a true comparison. On the face of it, the Metro Sales contract is about 20% higher per month. Like I mentioned, I don't know how to quantify the equipment costs that we're gonna have to spend in the next year anyway for firewalls and software upgrades and some other things. So yes, there is a price difference, but it's not necessarily cheaper if you're not getting the services that you need and you're operating effectively is where the concern is at on staff side of it. So our current provider is, as far as I can tell, is, you know, the cheapest out there. But I think our needs have evolved to the point where we need a little bit more.
Well, that's, I'm not here, you know, this is a Michelle question, I guess, and maybe one I shouldn't have to ask. Does that mirror what we want to do here? Does that mirror ours in-house?
We
Actually,
actually,
easier for that probably be had, but we're one.
yes, well, Ed and I had,
IT stuff, you can tell me anything, I believe. So.
well, Ed has shared some of the PUC's frustrations with their current service provider, and I will just say that Keith has exhibited a significant amount of patience and forbearance in this particular regard. If it had been me, the current provider would have been gone a long time ago, based on what I've been told. So,
Do other members of the SIMBA use this other companies that we know?
I do not.
Who are the clients do they have?
I don't have a list. Ed has really been taking the lead on working with them. I worked with Ed to make sure that it was providing the level of services that we need. Beyond that, I don't have a list.
Okay, or I was going with, since we share our IT with the city. Ed would probably be more comfortable having similar or better.
Currently, the city doesn't.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we actually don't have a need for the types of services that Metro Sales is going to provide, because Ed handles quite a bit of those services for us. He functions for PUC as somewhat of a go-between between the outside vendors that they have and the internal staff. We do have an overlap because we also use In Control, for our SCADA system for this, for the wastewater treatment plant. So there's some overlap there, in terms of, those types of functions, but they're providing, Metro Sales will be providing services that Ed handles for us, on a regular basis. So,
Yeah, so two things there. So we only have Ed 4 hours a week.
correct.
So that's part of it. He's here on a very limited basis. The second is, with the metering that we do around town through the AMI system, and we just have a much more complex internal IT structure. And so having an outside specialist, outside contractor available,
I think that's getting for it.
Mhm.
yeah, it's just our needs are bigger.
How long a contract are we looking at?
It's a 3-year, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
Right.
That's typically pretty normal.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's kind of a 60-day notice each way on this one too then. If they come and say, hey, we don't like Princeton no more, we're taking all our equipment and leaving.
Um,
Do they give us 60 days of something?
I would assume so. I can't remember specifically seeing that in the contract, but, the likelihood of that happening, I think,
It's small, but it's,
yeah. No, it's usually, a lot of that stuff is driven more by the client who isn't happy with the services rather than the contractor deciding they don't want to be in the business anymore. Or, no, yeah. But yeah, at that point, we're out on our own again.
Again, this has Ed's stamp of approval. He's appropriate people in the process.
And Michelle kind of mentioned this, he's actually been pushing me for a while, so, I've been the one that's wanted to just, I want to make sure that this is right before we brought it before the commission.
There's a lot of effort to change an IT.
Yeah, exactly.
You can sell me anything.
Yeah, we have managed IT services at our company. There's a lot of work. Managed IT doesn't mean it's taken care of and you don't have to worry anything about IT issue. It's not at all the case. You're still working really hard on a day-to-day basis to make sure
And I can
that your IT
imagine
is working properly and safely and securely.
IT stuff is better than two of yours. Over. Satisfied? Need action.
make a motion to accept the IT contract 2516 and number.
We have a motion.
Second.
Have a second. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, that carries. Okay, number 7. Sure.
I make the motion there.
That's one.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that carries. Thank you.
Thank you.